Standing beside my husband Patrick's casket in my simple black dress, I watched my daughter-in-law Tiffany whisper to the other mourners about my pathetic Walmart outfit. She rolled her eyes at my cheap polyester disaster and told everyone how embarrassing it was to have such a classless mother-in-law representing the family. Little did she know the dress she was mocking cost $66,000. Even less did she know that I owned the company where she worked. My name is Glenda Morrison, and for the past 30 years, I've been living the most elaborate secret of my life. While everyone believed I was just a struggling seamstress working out of my basement, I was actually the founder and CEO of Morrison Elegance, one of America's most prestigious luxury fashion houses. It all started back in 1994. Patrick's construction business had just collapsed during the recession, and we were drowning in debt. Our son Jake was only 5 years old, and we were facing foreclosure on our modest home in suburban Cleveland. Patrick spent his days drinking beer and staring at unpaid bills, his pride shattered beyond repair. I'd always been good with a needle and thread, so I started taking in alterations to make ends meet. But I had bigger dreams. Late at night, after Patrick passed out on the couch and Jake was tucked safely in bed, I would sketch dress designs on the backs of envelopes and grocery store receipts. My first real break came when I altered a wedding dress for Margaret Chen, a young lawyer who was getting married. She was so impressed with my work that she referred me to her wealthy friends. Soon I was creating custom gowns for socialites and business executives' wives. The problem was Patrick. Every time I brought home more than $50 from my little sewing hobby, his mood would darken. He would mutter about how his wife shouldn't have to work, how he was supposed to be the provider. The more successful I became, the more he drank and the more bitter he grew. So I made a decision that would define the next 3 decades of my life. I created a fictional network of investors and business partners. I told Patrick that wealthy women were hiring me as a middleman to connect them with exclusive European designers. According to my story, I was just a small-time seamstress who occasionally got lucky with referral fees. In reality, I was building an empire. I rented a small workshop space under the name Morrison Elegance and hired Eleanor Hartwell, a brilliant young woman fresh out of fashion school, to be my assistant and public face. Eleanor understood the situation immediately. She became the CEO that everyone knew while I remained the anonymous founder, hiding behind shell corporations and trust funds. By 2000, we had 3 boutiques in Manhattan, Beverly Hills, and Miami. By 2005, we were supplying custom gowns to Hollywood red carpet events. By 2010, Morrison Elegance was worth over $50 million. But at home, I was still just Glenda the seamstress, struggling to pay for Jake's college tuition and driving a 15-year-old Honda Civic that Patrick thought we could barely afford. The irony was delicious and heartbreaking at the same time. Patrick would complain about money while I secretly funded our entire lifestyle. I paid the mortgage, the car payments, Jake's education, and Patrick's medical bills when his drinking caught up with him. He never questioned where the money came from when I told him I had gotten a big alteration job or a lucky referral bonus. I justified it by telling myself I was protecting his dignity. Patrick Morrison was a proud man from a generation that believed husbands should be the breadwinners. If he had known his wife was worth over $200 million, it would have destroyed him completely. Jake brought Tiffany home 5 years ago. She was 27, then a recent graduate from the Fashion Institute with a degree in marketing and an attitude that could cut glass. From the moment she walked into our modest living room, she looked at me like I was something she had scraped off her designer shoe. "So you're the seamstress," she said, not bothering to hide her disdain. "Jake told me you do alterations for extra money." I smiled politely and offered her coffee. She declined, saying she only drank organic fair trade blends from specific roasters. Our regular grocery store coffee was apparently beneath her standards. Over the next few months, Tiffany made it clear that she considered herself far superior to her boyfriend's family. She had a good job at some luxury fashion company called Morrison Elegance, she informed us constantly. She worked with celebrities and wealthy clients. She understood real fashion and real business, unlike people who spent their lives hunched over sewing machines in basement workshops. The cruel irony was that Tiffany was working for me. I watched from the shadows as she climbed the corporate ladder at my own company, using her marketing degree and ruthless ambition to become a brand manager. Eleanor would update me on Tiffany's progress during our weekly phone calls, never knowing that the employee she was describing was my future daughter-in-law. "She's competent enough," Eleanor would say, "but she has a tendency to take credit for other people's ideas. And the way she talks to the junior staff is concerning. Several people have complained about her attitude." I bit my tongue and said nothing. What could I say that the arrogant young woman terrorizing my employees was about to marry my son? Jake proposed to Tiffany 2 years ago, and she accepted with the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to a business merger. Their wedding was a cold, calculated affair where Tiffany spent most of the reception networking with her fashion industry contacts. She barely acknowledged Patrick and me during the ceremony, introducing us to her friends as Jake's parents, with visible embarrassment. After the wedding, Tiffany's treatment of me grew even worse. She would roll her eyes whenever I spoke, interrupt me mid-sentence, and make snide comments about my clothing, my house, and my little sewing business. She seemed to take particular pleasure in explaining fashion and business concepts to me as if I were a child who couldn't possibly understand such sophisticated topics. "You know, Glenda," she said during one particularly painful family dinner, "if you really want to make something of yourself, you should study how real fashion companies operate. Places like Morrison Elegance, where I work, we deal with clients who spend more on a single dress than you probably make in a year." Jake would sometimes tell her to be nicer to his mother, but he was so blinded by love and impressed by her career success that he rarely pushed back seriously. Besides, he believed what everyone believed, that his mother was just a struggling seamstress who barely contributed to the family finances. 2 weeks ago, Patrick had a massive heart attack while working in his small garden behind our house. I found him collapsed among the tomato plants he was so proud of. The paramedics did everything they could, but 45 years of heavy drinking and stress had taken their toll. Patrick Morrison, my husband and the father of my child, died at Cleveland General Hospital, with me holding his hand. In those final moments, I realized I had missed my chance to tell him the truth. Patrick would never know that his failure as a provider was actually the foundation of one of America's most successful fashion empires. He would never know that the woman he thought he was supporting had actually been supporting him for 3 decades. The funeral arrangements fell to Jake and me, and by extension to Tiffany, who immediately took charge of everything. She insisted on choosing the flowers, the music, and even the church, despite having no real connection to Patrick. She treated the funeral like another networking event, inviting people from her company and telling everyone about her important job in the fashion industry. And then came the morning of the funeral when I chose to wear the black dress that would change everything. The morning of Patrick's funeral, I stood in my bedroom closet staring at 2 very different options. On one side hung a simple, elegant black dress that appeared modest and understated. On the other side were several designer gowns that clearly shouted wealth and status. I chose the simple dress. It was one of my own designs from Morrison Elegance's latest collection, crafted from the finest Italian wool and finished with hand-sewn details that only a trained eye could appreciate. The dress cost $66,000 and was currently being featured in Vogue as an example of understated luxury. But to the casual observer, it looked like something from a department store clearance rack. I wanted to see exactly how far Tiffany's cruelty would go. St. Mary's Church was packed with over 200 mourners. Patrick had lived in the same neighborhood for 40 years and had touched many lives through his construction work and volunteer activities. The pews were filled with old friends, former co-workers, neighbors, and family members who had come to pay their respects. I noticed several familiar faces from Morrison Elegance scattered throughout the crowd. Eleanor Hartwell sat in the 4th row wearing one of our signature black suits. 3 of our top executives were present along with several employees from our marketing department. They were there because Tiffany had invited them, wanting to show off her connections and importance. What none of them knew was that they were attending the funeral of their CEO's husband. Tiffany arrived at the church in a dramatic black designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her jewelry sparkled under the sanctuary lights. She looked like she was attending a Hollywood premiere rather than a funeral. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted from neutral politeness to barely concealed disgust. "Oh my goodness, Glenda," she said loudly enough for nearby mourners to hear. "What are you wearing?" I looked down at my dress as if seeing it for the first time. "It's just a black dress, dear. I thought it was appropriate for the occasion." "Appropriate." Tiffany laughed a sharp sound that echoed off the church walls. "It looks like you bought it at Walmart. The fabric is so cheap and wrinkled. Couldn't you have found something more dignified for your own husband's funeral?" Several people turned to stare, including Eleanor, who looked puzzled by the exchange. Jake was greeting other mourners near the entrance and hadn't heard his wife's comments. "I think it's fine," I said quietly, playing my role as the meek mother-in-law. "Fine." Tiffany grabbed my arm roughly and pulled me aside. "Glenda, this is embarrassing. People are looking at you like you're some kind of homeless person who wandered in off the street. Don't you understand that appearances matter? Especially at events like this." More heads turned in our direction. I could see Margaret Chen, the lawyer who had given me my first real break 30 years ago, watching with a concerned expression. She knew our family's real financial situation, but she also understood the importance of maintaining Patrick's dignity. "I work in the fashion industry," Tiffany continued, her voice growing louder and more condescending. "I know about these things. That dress makes you look poor and desperate. It makes the whole family look bad. It makes Jake look bad." "I'm sorry," I whispered, allowing my voice to shake slightly. "I don't really understand fashion the way you do." "That's obvious," Tiffany snorted. "Look at me, Glenda. This is how a successful woman dresses. This is what real elegance looks like. You're wearing what polyester, some synthetic blend from a discount store. It's mortifying." Father Thomas approached us with a gentle smile, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. "Ladies, we should probably take our seats. The service will begin in a few minutes." "Of course, Father," Tiffany said sweetly, instantly transforming her demeanor. "We were just discussing how difficult it must be for Glenda to afford proper funeral attire on a seamstress's budget." Father Thomas's smile faltered. He had been our family priest for 20 years and had officiated Jake's wedding. He knew things about our financial situation that didn't add up with Tiffany's narrative, but he was too polite to contradict her publicly. As we walked toward the family pew, Tiffany continued her commentary for anyone within earshot. "It's just so sad," she said to a group of Patrick's former co-workers. "Poor Glenda has spent so many years struggling to make ends meet. She just doesn't understand how to present herself properly. I keep trying to help her, but you know how it is with older people who've never had exposure to real quality." I took my seat in the front row between Jake and Tiffany. My son was lost in his grief, staring at his father's casket with red-rimmed eyes. He had loved Patrick deeply despite his flaws, and the loss was hitting him hard. Tiffany, however, seemed more focused on working the room than mourning. She kept turning around to wave at her co-workers and mouth greetings to people she recognized. During Father Thomas's opening prayers, she whispered loudly about her important role at Morrison Elegance and how she had been personally invited to next month's Fashion Week events. "I manage relationships with our most exclusive clients," she told the woman sitting behind us. "Celebrities, socialites, people who spend more on a single outfit than most families make in a year. It's such an honor to work for a company with that level of prestige." The woman nodded politely, clearly uncomfortable with Tiffany's self-promotion during a funeral service. When it came time for family members to share memories of Patrick, Jake stood up first. His voice broke as he talked about his father's work ethic, his love of gardening, and his pride in building things with his hands. It was a beautiful, heartfelt tribute that brought tears to many eyes. Then Tiffany stood up. "I only knew Patrick for 5 years," she began, but I could see immediately what a burden he carried. It must have been so difficult for him being unable to properly provide for his family, having to watch his wife work those little sewing jobs just to keep food on the table. I think it broke his heart knowing that his son had to grow up in such humble circumstances. I felt my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. Jake looked confused and hurt by his wife's words. But Patrick never complained, Tiffany continued. He never blamed Glenda for their financial struggles, even though I think we all understand how frustrating it must have been. He was a good man who deserved better, and I hope he's finally at peace now. Several mourners shifted uncomfortably. Father Thomas looked distinctly unhappy with the direction of Tiffany's speech. I just want to say, Tiffany concluded, that I'm honored to be part of this family now, and I'll do everything I can to help Glenda transition into this new phase of her life. Maybe I can teach her some basic principles about presentation and dignity, about how successful women carry themselves in the world. She sat down with a satisfied smile, clearly pleased with her performance. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Eleanor Hartwell was staring at Tiffany with obvious disgust. During the final hymn, Tiffany leaned over and whispered in my ear, "After the reception, we need to talk about your living situation. Jake and I have been discussing it, and we think you might be more comfortable in a smaller place. Maybe one of those senior apartment complexes. We could help you find something affordable." I nodded meekly, still playing my role. "That's very thoughtful of you, dear." "It's not about being thoughtful," Tiffany said bluntly. "It's about being realistic. You can't afford that house on your own, and Jake shouldn't have to support you indefinitely. He has his own family to think about now." After the service, as mourners filed out of the church, Tiffany positioned herself near the exit like a receiving line queen. She introduced herself to everyone as Jake's wife, the brand manager at Morrison Elegance, what made sure to point out my unfortunate fashion choices to anyone who would listen. "Poor thing has never had any guidance about proper attire," she told a group of Patrick's construction buddies. "I keep trying to help her understand basic elegance, but some people just aren't born with natural taste." The final straw came during the cemetery service. As Patrick's casket was being lowered into the ground, Tiffany grabbed my arm again and hissed in my ear, "Stand up straighter, Glenda. People are watching. Try to have some dignity for once in your life. Learn from women like me who actually understand how to conduct themselves with class." That was the moment I decided Tiffany Morrison had run out of chances. I had spent 30 years protecting my family by hiding in the shadows, but some insults could not be tolerated. Some cruelty demanded consequences. As dirt was shoveled onto my husband's grave, I was already planning my daughter-in-law's professional destruction. 3 days after Patrick's funeral, I called Eleanor Hartwell for an emergency meeting at Morrison Elegance headquarters in downtown Cleveland. I told Jake I was visiting a friend who was helping me sort through grief counseling options. He barely looked up from the legal documents scattered across our kitchen table, too overwhelmed with settling his father's estate to question my story. The Morrison Elegance building was a sleek 15-story tower that I had purchased 7 years earlier. Eleanor's office on the top floor offered stunning views of Lake Erie and the Cleveland skyline. As I sat across from her mahogany desk, I felt the familiar thrill of stepping back into my real world after days of playing the grieving widow. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Eleanor said, pouring coffee from a sterling silver service. "Patrick was a good man." "Thank you, but I'm not here to discuss Patrick today. I need you to pull Tiffany Morrison's complete employment file." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. She had worked with me long enough to recognize the tone I used when someone had crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. "Your daughter-in-law, is there a problem?" "You could say that." Eleanor retrieved Tiffany's file from the secure cabinet behind her desk. As she spread the documents across the coffee table, I studied my daughter-in-law's professional history with new eyes. Tiffany's resume looked impressive on the surface. Bachelor's degree in fashion marketing from the Fashion Institute of Technology, previous experience at 2 smaller fashion houses in New York, glowing letters of recommendation from former supervisors. But I had learned to read between the lines during 30 years of hiring and firing employees. Contact her previous employers. I instructed Eleanor. I want to speak with her actual supervisors, not just human resources representatives. Find out why she really left those positions. While Eleanor made phone calls, I reviewed Tiffany's performance evaluations from her 5 years at Morrison Elegance. The official ratings were satisfactory, but the written comments told a different story. Shows initiative, but sometimes takes credit for collaborative efforts. Strong marketing skills, but interpersonal relationships need improvement. Tends to be dismissive of colleagues with less education or experience. I flipped through expense reports and found what I was looking for. Tiffany had been charging personal items as business expenses for over 2 years. A $500 dinner at an upscale restaurant with no client present. Clothing purchases from competing fashion houses labeled as market research. Even a weekend trip to New York that she claimed was for Fashion Week, despite the fact that our company hadn't sent her to any official Fashion Week events. Glenda, Eleanor said, hanging up the phone. I just spoke with Tiffany's former supervisor at Pinnacle Fashion. She was fired for stealing design concepts and passing them off as her own work. Fired her resume, says she left for better opportunities. The supervisor was very clear. They caught her copying sketches from their senior designers and presenting them to clients as original ideas. She was terminated immediately, but they agreed not to pursue legal action in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. I leaned back in my chair processing this information. Tiffany hadn't just lied on her resume, she had a documented history of theft and deception. What about the recommendation letters? Forged. The supervisor I spoke with never wrote a recommendation letter for Tiffany Morrison. In fact, she said she would have advised any potential employer against hiring her. Eleanor pulled up Tiffany's computer access logs on her laptop. As a brand manager, Tiffany had legitimate reasons to access client files, design documents, and marketing materials, but the logs showed something troubling. She's been downloading files she has no business accessing, Eleanor said, pointing to the screen. Financial reports, executive meeting minutes, strategic planning documents. And look at this. The logs showed that Tiffany had been copying design sketches and client contact information to external drives. She had also been taking photographs of confidential documents with her personal phone. She's preparing to steal our client base, I said grimly. Eleanor nodded. It gets worse. I've been getting reports from other employees about her behavior. She's been approaching junior staff members and asking questions about their satisfaction with the company. She's suggesting they might find better opportunities elsewhere. She's trying to recruit our people for something. That's what I think too, and there's something else you should see. Eleanor pulled out a folder containing printouts from social media and online business registration sites. Tiffany had incorporated a new company called Elegant Tiffany Designs 3 months earlier. The business registration listed her as CEO and founder of a luxury fashion consulting and design firm. She's been planning her exit strategy, I said, for months, and she's been using our resources to build her competing business. I found purchase orders for fabric and supplies that were charged to our accounts, but delivered to addresses that don't match any of our projects. I thought about Tiffany's behavior at the funeral, her arrogant dismissal of my appearance, and her grand speeches about understanding real fashion. She'd been planning to leave Morrison Elegance and start her own company using stolen designs, poached employees, and hijacked client relationships. I want security footage from her office, I said, going back 6 months, and I want her email monitored. Can we do that legally? Absolutely. All employee communications on company equipment are subject to monitoring according to our employment agreements. I'll have IT pull everything together. Eleanor made another phone call, and within an hour we were reviewing security footage on her computer screen. The videos showed exactly what I expected to see. Tiffany staying late in her office to photograph documents. Tiffany copying files to USB drives. Tiffany having quiet conversations with other employees that ended when supervisors appeared. But the most damaging footage showed Tiffany meeting with people I didn't recognize in our conference rooms. She was presenting them with what appeared to be Morrison Elegance design portfolios and client lists. She's been bringing potential investors into our building, Eleanor said, using our own conference facilities to pitch her competing business. Do we have audio on these meetings? Some of them. The conference rooms have recording capabilities for client presentations. Eleanor pulled up audio files from 3 different meetings. In each one, Tiffany could be heard describing Morrison Elegance as an outdated company run by invisible investors who don't understand modern fashion. She promised her potential investors that she could deliver the same quality and client relationships without the old-fashioned management structure. In one particularly damaging recording, Tiffany discussed specific Morrison Elegance clients by name, detailing their spending habits and personal preferences. She was literally offering to sell our client relationships to fund her new venture. This is corporate espionage, I said. She's not just stealing from us, she's trying to destroy us. Eleanor pulled out one final document that made my blood run cold. It was a draft resignation letter dated for the following week, timed to coincide with Morrison Elegance's annual charity gala. She's planning to announce her departure at our biggest social event of the year, Eleanor said, in front of all our clients and industry contacts. Maximum embarrassment for the company. I studied the letter, noting Tiffany's plan to move on to more innovative opportunities, and her suggestion that Morrison Elegance was losing touch with modern fashion sensibilities. She wants to humiliate us publicly before launching her competing business, I said. Take our clients, steal our people, and destroy our reputation in one coordinated attack. What do you want me to do? I looked out the window at the Cleveland skyline, thinking about 30 years of building this company from nothing, thinking about the employees who depended on Morrison Elegance for their livelihoods, thinking about Tiffany's sneering face at Patrick's funeral as she mocked my cheap dress and my classless behavior. Schedule a meeting with Margaret Chen. I want to know exactly what criminal charges we can file, and I want Tiffany's termination paperwork prepared, but don't execute it yet. When do you want to fire her? I smiled, feeling a cold satisfaction settle into my chest. At the charity gala, in front of everyone she's been trying to impress. I want her humiliation to be as public as she planned ours to be. Eleanor grinned. That's next Saturday night. 500 guests, including half the fashion industry elite. Perfect. Let's give Tiffany Morrison a lesson in real consequences. For the next week, I transformed myself into the perfect grieving widow. I shuffled around the house in my bathrobe, speaking in whispers and dabbing at my eyes with tissues. When Jake called to check on me, I made my voice sound weak and defeated. When Tiffany visited, I played the role of a broken woman who had finally accepted her place in the world. I've been thinking about what you said at the funeral, I told Tiffany during one of her visits. You're right about the apartment. I can't afford this house anymore. Maybe it would be better if I found somewhere smaller. Tiffany's face lit up with triumph. I'm so glad you're being realistic, Glenda. Jake and I have already started looking at some options for you. There's a lovely senior community about 30 minutes from here. Very affordable. You'd fit right in with the other ladies there. That sounds wonderful, dear. I just want to be less of a burden on you and Jake. What Tiffany didn't know was that I had hidden recording devices throughout my house. Every conversation was being captured and stored on secure servers. Every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, every plan she made for my future was being documented. The recordings revealed the true scope of Tiffany's contempt for me and her plans for the family. Jake's mother is finally accepting reality, she told someone during a phone conversation in my living room. It's pathetic how long she held on to this fantasy that she could maintain a middle-class lifestyle on her little sewing income. She's 68 years old and has nothing to show for her life except a pile of fabric scraps and a sewing machine older than dirt. During another call, she discussed her timeline for taking over family decisions completely. Once we get her settled in the senior housing, I can start making real changes. That house is sitting on valuable land. We could sell it and invest the money properly, and Jake won't have to waste his weekends checking on his pathetic mother anymore. But the most damaging recordings captured Tiffany's conversations about Morrison Elegance and her plans for corporate sabotage. The company is run by some mysterious old investors who never show their faces. She explained to someone who was apparently helping finance her competing business. I've been there 5 years, and nobody has ever seen the actual owner. It's probably some trust fund brat who inherited daddy's money and doesn't have a clue about real business. She went on to describe Morrison Elegance's client base in detail, sharing confidential information about spending habits, personal preferences, and upcoming orders. Catherine Winters spends at least $200,000 a year on custom gowns. She's obsessed with vintage Hollywood glamour and always requests modifications to make dresses more revealing than the original designs. She's been cheating on her husband for 3 years, so she's motivated to look good for her younger boyfriend. The Henderson family has been clients for 8 years. They order matching outfits for every major social event. The daughter is getting married next spring, and they'll probably spend $500,000 on wedding-related clothing. They're extremely loyal to Morrison Elegance, but only because they've never been offered better service elsewhere. Jonathan Mills is our biggest celebrity client. He spends about $300,000 annually on red carpet looks for his wife and daughters. He's extremely demanding and has fired 2 other fashion houses for missing deadlines, but he pays premium rates for exclusive access. Each conversation provided more evidence of corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. Tiffany was systematically stealing Morrison Elegance's most valuable asset, our client relationships. But the recordings also revealed something else. Tiffany's utter disdain for Jake and his family extended far beyond me. Jake is sweet, but he's completely naive about money and business, she told a friend during one particularly revealing conversation. He actually believes his mother's sob stories about struggling to pay bills. He doesn't understand that some people are just born losers. His whole family has this pathetic working-class mentality. The best thing about marrying Jake is that it gives me legitimacy in Cleveland society. People respect him because his father was this beloved local contractor guy. It's opened doors for me professionally that I never could have accessed on my own. Once I establish my own company and build up my client base, I probably won't need him anymore. I can find someone with better financial prospects and actual social connections. Jake's a stepping stone, not a destination. I listened to these recordings with a mixture of rage and satisfaction. Tiffany wasn't just stealing from my company and insulting me. She was planning to destroy my son's life as soon as it was convenient for her career. Meanwhile, Eleanor was gathering additional evidence from Morrison Elegance. Security footage showed Tiffany meeting with more potential investors and competitors. Email monitoring revealed communications with headhunters who were trying to recruit our best employees. Financial audits uncovered thousands of dollars in fraudulent expense claims. But the most significant discovery came when Eleanor accessed Tiffany's company laptop and found detailed business plans for elegant Tiffany designs. The plans were devastating in their scope and cynicism. Tiffany intended to steal 15 of Morrison Elegance's largest clients, representing over $20 million in annual revenue. She had identified 12 key employees to recruit, including 3 senior designers and our head of client relations. She even had a marketing strategy designed to position Morrison Elegance as outdated and out of touch with modern luxury consumers. She's planning to destroy us systematically, Eleanor told me during one of our secret meetings. This isn't just about starting a competing business. This is about eliminating Morrison Elegance as a viable company. What's her timeline? According to these documents, she wants to have her business fully operational within 6 months of leaving Morrison Elegance. She's already secured $2 million in startup funding from investors who believe they're backing a revolutionary new approach to luxury fashion. I studied Tiffany's business projections and marketing materials. Her investors had no idea they were funding a venture built on stolen intellectual property and fraudulent claims. She's told them she has exclusive relationships with celebrity clients and access to European design houses. Eleanor continued. None of that is true. She's promising things she can only deliver by stealing from us. Do we have enough evidence to file criminal charges? Margaret Chen thinks so. corporate espionage, fraud, theft of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty. She could be looking at serious prison time. Good, but I want to wait until after the charity gala. I want everyone to see exactly who Tiffany Morrison really is. The charity gala was Morrison Elegance's most important social event of the year. 500 guests, including celebrities, socialites, fashion industry leaders, and major clients. It was scheduled for Saturday night at the Cleveland Museum of Art, with proceeds supporting local arts education programs. Tiffany had been heavily involved in planning the event, seeing it as an opportunity to network and promote her image as a rising star in the fashion industry. What she didn't know was that she was about to become the evening's main attraction for all the wrong reasons. As Saturday approached, I could barely contain my anticipation. For 30 years, I had hidden in the shadows while building one of America's most successful fashion companies. For 5 years, I had endured Tiffany's cruelty and arrogance, while she unknowingly worked for me and planned my family's destruction. It was time for the shadows to reveal their secrets. The Morrison Elegance Charity Gala was held on a crisp October evening at the Cleveland Museum of Art. The museum's marble halls had been transformed into an elegant showcase for our latest collections, with models stationed throughout the galleries wearing our most spectacular gowns. 500 of Cleveland's elite mingled among priceless artwork, sipping champagne and admiring the seamless blend of classical beauty and modern fashion. I arrived fashionably late, wearing the same simple black dress that had caused such a stir at Patrick's funeral. The irony was perfect. Once again, I appeared to be the underdressed, out-of-place widow who didn't understand proper social etiquette. Tiffany spotted me immediately from across the main gallery. She was holding court near a display of Morrison Elegance evening gowns, surrounded by co-workers and clients who hung on her every word about fashion trends and celebrity styling. Her own dress was a stunning silver creation that probably cost more than most people's cars. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted from social charm to barely disguised horror. "Oh my goodness," I heard her say to the group around her. "Jake's mother actually came. Look at what she's wearing." She excused herself from her admirers and strode across the marble floor toward me, her heels clicking ominously with each step. "Glenda," she said, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. "What are you doing here, and what on earth possessed you to wear that same awful dress?" "Jake thought it would be good for me to get out of the house," I said meekly, "and this is my only nice dress. I couldn't afford to buy something new." "This is a Morrison Elegance corporate event," Tiffany hissed. "There are celebrities here, fashion industry leaders, important clients. You can't just wander around looking like someone's cleaning lady." Several people nearby turned to stare at us. I recognized Catherine Winters, the client Tiffany had discussed so indiscreetly in her recorded phone calls. Catherine was watching our interaction with obvious discomfort. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I thought since you work here it would be okay." "I work here," Tiffany said loudly. "I'm a brand manager for one of America's most prestigious fashion houses. You're a seamstress who alters hemlines in her basement. There's a significant difference." Eleanor Hartwell appeared at my side wearing one of our signature black suits and a carefully neutral expression. "Good evening, Mrs. Morrison," she said formally. "I'm so glad you could join us tonight." Tiffany looked confused by Eleanor's deferential tone. As far as she knew, Eleanor was the CEO of Morrison Elegance and shouldn't be showing such respect to a nobody seamstress. "Eleanor," Tiffany said with forced brightness, "I was just explaining to my mother-in-law that this might not be the right venue for someone of her background." "I think Mrs. Morrison looks lovely," Eleanor replied coolly. "That's a beautiful dress." "Beautiful?" Tiffany laughed sharply. "Eleanor, I know you're trying to be polite, but that thing looks like it came from a discount store clearance rack. The fabric is clearly synthetic, the cut is completely unflattering, and the styling is at least 10 years out of date." More heads turned in our direction. I could see several Morrison Elegance executives watching the scene with growing concern. Margaret Chen, our company lawyer, had positioned herself nearby with a group of what appeared to be law enforcement officers in elegant evening wear. Actually, Eleanor said, I believe that dress is from our latest collection. It's one of our most exclusive pieces. Tiffany's face flushed red. That's impossible. I know every piece in our current collection. That dress is not Morrison Elegance quality. Would you like to make a wager on that? Eleanor asked sweetly. Excuse me. I said, would you like to bet on the origin and value of Mrs. Morrison's dress? Tiffany looked around at the growing crowd of onlookers. Several clients were listening intently, along with fashion journalists who had been covering the event. This was exactly the kind of public platform she loved, an opportunity to demonstrate her superior knowledge and authority. Fine, Tiffany said confidently. I'll bet you $1,000 that dress costs less than $50 and came from some discount chain store. Eleanor smiled. Make it $10,000 and you have a deal. The crowd gasped. $10,000 was serious money even among Cleveland's wealthy elite. Several people pulled out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a significant confrontation. 10,000. Tiffany hesitated for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. Fine, but when I win, I want a public apology for questioning my professional expertise. And when I win, Eleanor said, I want a public acknowledgement that appearances can be deceiving. Jake appeared at the edge of the crowd, looking confused and increasingly worried. He'd been networking with some of his father's old construction industry friends when the commotion began. What's going on here? He asked, moving to stand beside me. Your wife is about to learn an important lesson, Eleanor said. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wager. Mrs. Tiffany Morrison believes that Mrs. Glenda Morrison's dress is a cheap imitation worth less than $50. I maintain that it's an authentic Morrison Elegance creation worth significantly more. Significantly more? Tiffany scoffed. Even our most basic pieces start at $5,000. That dress couldn't possibly be worth more than the fabric it's sewn from. Eleanor pulled out her phone and called someone. Could you please bring up the catalog information for style number ME 2024-147, the black wool dress from our understated elegance collection? Within minutes, a Morrison Elegance staff member appeared with a tablet displaying detailed product information. Eleanor took the tablet and held it up for the crowd to see. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, I present Morrison Elegance style number ME 2024-147. Black Italian wool dress with hand-sewn details and custom tailoring, featured in this month's Vogue magazine as an example of quiet luxury. Retail price $66,000. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Several people stepped closer to examine my dress with new eyes, suddenly recognizing the subtle details and perfect fit that marked it as truly exceptional craftsmanship. Tiffany's face went white, then red, then white again. That's impossible, she stammered. There's no way that dress costs $66,000. Someone made a mistake. Are you suggesting our pricing department doesn't know the value of our own merchandise? Eleanor asked innocently. I'm suggesting that someone is lying, Tiffany said desperately. Maybe to make some pathetic old woman feel better about herself. But I know quality when I see it, and that dress is not high-end fashion. Jake looked mortified. Tiffany, maybe you should stop talking. No, she snapped. I've worked for Morrison Elegance for 5 years. I know every piece in our collection. I know what real luxury looks like, and that dress is fake or stolen or someone is playing an elaborate practical joke. Eleanor's smile grew wider. Mrs. Morrison, would you mind telling us where you acquired this dress? I looked around at the expectant faces playing my role as the overwhelmed widow one last time. I made it myself, I said quietly, in my sewing room. Tiffany threw back her head and laughed triumphantly. There you have it. She admits it. She made it herself in her basement workshop. Case closed. She made it herself, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. How interesting. Mrs. Morrison, do you often create copies of Morrison Elegance designs? I don't copy anything, I said, allowing a note of strength to enter my voice for the first time. I design original pieces. You design? Tiffany was practically shrieking now. Glenda, you alter hemlines and fix broken zippers. You don't design anything. You certainly don't design $60,000 dresses. The crowd had grown to include most of the gala attendees, celebrities, socialites, fashion industry executives, and journalists were all pressed in close, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Eleanor looked at her watch. Ladies and gentlemen, we had planned to make a special announcement later this evening, but I think the timing is perfect for it now. She gestured to someone at the back of the crowd, and a spotlight suddenly illuminated a small platform that had been set up near the museum's main staircase. Security personnel quietly positioned themselves around the exits. Tonight, Eleanor continued, Morrison Elegance is celebrating our 30th anniversary. For 3 decades, our company has been known for exceptional quality, innovative design, and absolute integrity. But there's something our clients and employees don't know about our history. Tiffany looked around nervously, finally sensing that something was terribly wrong. For 30 years, Eleanor said, the true founder and creative genius behind Morrison Elegance has chosen to remain anonymous. Tonight, for the first time, she's ready to reveal herself to the world. Jake grabbed my arm. Mom, we should probably go. This seems like company business. Actually, Eleanor said, I think your mother should stay. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder, owner, and creative director of Morrison Elegance, Mrs. Glenda Morrison. The spotlight found me in the crowd, illuminating my simple black dress and silver hair as 500 of Cleveland's most influential people turned to stare. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the soft whisper of expensive fabric as people shifted to get a better view. Then the applause began. Slowly at first, as recognition dawned on the faces of longtime clients and industry professionals. Catherine Winters was the first to start clapping her eyes wide with sudden understanding. Then Jonathan Mills joined in, followed by a cascade of others as the reality of what they were witnessing sank in. The applause grew thunderous, echoing off the marble walls of the Cleveland Museum of Art like a breaking wave. Fashion industry executives who had worked with Morrison Elegance for years were suddenly seeing the mysterious founder they had speculated about for decades. Celebrities who had worn my designs on red carpets around the world were realizing they had just witnessed one of the most dramatic reveals in fashion history. But not everyone was clapping. Jake stood frozen beside me, his mouth hanging open as he tried to process what he was hearing. His mother, the struggling seamstress who had spent her life taking in alterations to make ends meet, was apparently one of the most successful fashion designers in America. And Tiffany looked like she was about to faint. No, she whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, that's not possible. She's just a seamstress. She's nobody. Eleanor appeared at my side with a wireless microphone. I took it with steady hands, 30 years of hiding finally coming to an end. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. I appreciate your warm welcome, though I suspect some of you are more surprised than others. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the crowd. I could see fashion journalists frantically typing on their phones, already filing stories about the night's unexpected revelation. 30 years ago, I continued, I started Morrison Elegance in my garage because my family needed money and I had always loved creating beautiful clothing. What I never expected was that my little sewing business would grow into something that required me to hide my identity to protect the people I loved. I looked directly at Jake, whose face was cycling through confusion, hurt, and dawning understanding. My husband Patrick was a proud man from a generation that believed men should be the family providers. If he had known that his wife was earning millions while he struggled to find work, it would have destroyed him. So I created a fiction that allowed him to maintain his dignity while I built a company that could support our family. Jake's eyes filled with tears as pieces of his childhood suddenly made sense. The mysterious referral bonuses that had paid for his college education. The way financial problems always seemed to resolve themselves just when things looked desperate. His mother's uncanny knowledge of fashion and business, despite her supposed lack of formal education. For 3 decades, I said, I have watched from the shadows as Morrison Elegance grew into something I never imagined possible. I have been proud to employ hundreds of talented people and to create clothing that makes women feel beautiful and confident. My voice hardened as I turned to look at Tiffany, who was still shaking her head in denial. But I have also had to watch as someone I welcomed into my family use their position at my company to steal from me, lie to me, and plan my destruction. Tiffany made a choking sound. Several Morrison Elegance executives moved closer, their faces grim with purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, corporate espionage is a serious crime. When employees use their access to confidential information to benefit competitors or plan competing businesses, they violate not just company policy, but federal law. Margaret Chen stepped forward with a folder of documents and what appeared to be law enforcement credentials. Over the past week, I said, we have discovered that Tiffany Morrison has been systematically stealing proprietary designs, client information, and trade secrets. She has been planning to use this stolen information to launch a competing business designed to destroy Morrison Elegance. The crowd was dead silent now. This had moved far beyond a family drama or corporate announcement. This was a public exposure of criminal activity at one of Cleveland's most prestigious social events. We have recordings of Mrs. Morrison sharing confidential client information with unauthorized parties, I continued. We have security footage of her photographing proprietary documents and copying files to external storage devices. We have evidence of expense account fraud, employee solicitation for competing businesses, and breach of fiduciary duty. Tiffany finally found her voice. You can't prove any of that, she said desperately. I've never stolen anything. I've been loyal to Morrison Elegance for 5 years. Eleanor stepped forward with a tablet and activated the sound system. Suddenly, Tiffany's own voice filled the museum gallery. The company is run by some mysterious old investors who never show their faces. I've been there 5 years and nobody has ever seen the actual owner. It's probably some trust fund brat who inherited daddy's money and doesn't have a clue about real business. The recording continued playing Tiffany's detailed descriptions of Morrison Elegance clients and their personal information, her plans to steal designs and recruit employees, her contemptuous dismissal of the company she had sworn to serve. But the most damaging recording was yet to come. Jake is sweet, but he's completely naive about money and business. He actually believes his mother's sob stories about struggling to pay bills. He doesn't understand that some people are just born losers. His whole family has this pathetic working-class mentality. Jake's face crumpled as he heard his wife's true opinion of him and his family. The woman he had married and trusted was not just a criminal, but someone who held him in complete contempt. Once I establish my own company and build up my client base, I probably won't need him anymore. Tiffany's recorded voice continued. I can find someone with better financial prospects and actual social connections. Jake's a stepping stone, not a destination. The recording stopped, leaving a devastating silence. Tiffany stood in the center of the crowd like a deer caught in headlights, surrounded by 500 witnesses to her exposure and humiliation. Based on this evidence, Margaret Chen announced, Morrison Elegance is terminating Tiffany Morrison's employment effective immediately. Additionally, we will be filing criminal charges for corporate espionage fraud and theft of trade secrets. 2 plainclothes police officers moved through the crowd and positioned themselves on either side of Tiffany. One of them spoke quietly into a radio, while the other began reading from a small card. Tiffany Morrison, you are under arrest for corporate espionage and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Tiffany's carefully constructed facade finally collapsed completely. Wait, she screamed, trying to back away from the officers. You can't do this to me. I'm important. I'm a brand manager. I know celebrities. I know fashion industry leaders. She looked desperately around the crowd, searching for allies among the people she had been trying to impress just minutes earlier. But the same celebrities and fashion leaders she had name-dropped were now staring at her with disgust and contempt. "This is all fake," she shouted as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. "She's not really the owner. This is some kind of setup, some kind of revenge because I told the truth about her cheap clothes." "Mrs. Morrison," one of the police officers said, "you need to come with us now." As they led her toward the exit, Tiffany made one last desperate attempt to salvage her reputation. "Jake," she called out, "tell them this is all lies. Tell them your mother is just a seamstress. Tell them she's making this up to get revenge on me." But Jake had turned away, unable to look at the woman who had just been exposed as both a criminal and someone who had never loved him at all. The crowd parted silently as Tiffany was escorted from the museum, her silver dress catching the light one last time before she disappeared through the elegant doors she had entered so confidently just hours earlier. In the aftermath of her departure, the gala attendees slowly began to process what they had witnessed. Fashion industry executives who had known Tiffany professionally looked stunned by the revelation of her criminal activities. Clients who had trusted her with their personal information appeared shocked by the recordings of her sharing their secrets. But gradually, the focus shifted back to me. Catherine Winters was the first to approach, extending her hand with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Morrison, I owe you an apology. Tiffany shared private information about my family, and I had no idea she was violating my trust so completely." "That's not your fault," I assured her. "You trusted an employee to maintain confidentiality. That trust was betrayed, not misplaced." Other clients began to approach, some to apologize for Tiffany's behavior, others to express amazement at the revelation of my identity. Several fashion journalists requested interviews, clearly recognizing that they had stumbled onto one of the biggest stories of the year. But the person I was most concerned about was Jake, who stood apart from the crowd with tears streaming down his face. I handed the microphone back to Eleanor and made my way to my son, who looked like his entire world had just been turned upside down. "Jake," I said gently, "we need to talk." 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse lobby watching Tiffany Morrison being led away in handcuffs after receiving her sentence. 5 years in federal prison for corporate espionage, fraud, and theft of trade secrets. Full restitution of $2.3 million in damages. A lifetime ban from working in the fashion industry. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing remarks, noting that Tiffany had violated not just legal obligations, but basic human decency in her treatment of family members and colleagues. Jake stood beside me, his arm around the shoulders of Sarah Mitchell, the elementary school teacher he had been dating for the past 4 months. Sarah was everything Tiffany wasn't: kind, genuine, unpretentious, and completely uninterested in money or status. She treated everyone with respect, including me, and Jake's face lit up whenever she entered a room. "It's finally over," he said quietly as we watched Tiffany disappear into the prisoner transport van. "No," I corrected him gently. "It's finally beginning." The past 6 months had been a journey of healing and discovery for our family. Jake had initially struggled with anger over my 30-year deception, feeling that I had robbed him of the chance to truly know his parents. But gradually, he came to understand the impossible position I had been in and the sacrifices I had made to protect both him and Patrick. We had long conversations about Patrick's pride and the generational attitudes that had shaped his understanding of marriage and family roles. Jake began to see his father not as a failure, but as a man caught between changing times and unchanging expectations. "Dad would have been proud of what you built," Jake told me one evening as we sorted through Patrick's belongings, even if his pride wouldn't let him admit it at the time. The revelation of my identity had transformed Morrison Elegance in ways I never expected. Our stock value increased by 40% as investors recognized the stability that came with having the actual founder actively running the company. Orders flooded in from new clients who wanted to wear designs created by the woman who had pulled off one of fashion's greatest secrets. Eleanor was promoted to Chief Operating Officer, a role she had essentially been fulfilling for years anyway. Together, we implemented new policies designed to protect employee dignity and prevent the kind of workplace bullying that Tiffany had practiced. We also established the Patrick Morrison Memorial Scholarship Fund, providing full college tuition for children of construction workers and other blue-collar families. It seemed like the perfect way to honor Patrick's memory while acknowledging the value of honest work and family sacrifice. The media attention had been intense, but ultimately positive. Fashion magazines ran features about the hidden genius who had built an empire while maintaining family humility. Business journals analyzed my unconventional approach to corporate leadership and work-life balance. But the most meaningful recognition came from my employees. At Morrison Elegance's annual meeting, they presented me with a custom-designed dress that incorporated elements from every collection I had created over 30 years. The card read, "To the boss who never forgot where she came from or the people who helped her get there." The investigation into Tiffany's activities had revealed the full scope of her planned destruction. She had been just weeks away from launching elegant Tiffany designs with stolen Morrison Elegance client lists, poached employees, and copied designs. Her business plan had projected $20 million in first-year revenue, all of it stolen from the company that had given her a career. The criminal case had also exposed Tiffany's history of deception and manipulation. Her college transcripts revealed that she had plagiarized several major projects. Her previous employers confirmed patterns of theft and dishonesty that went back years. The woman Jake had married was not just a criminal, but someone who had built her entire adult life on lies and stolen achievements. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Jake confided to me one afternoon. "The way she talked about you, about Dad, about our family. I should have seen who she really was." "People like Tiffany are experts at manipulation," I assured him. "They show different faces to different people. The face she showed you was designed to make you love her. The face she showed me was designed to keep me in my place. Neither one was authentic." Sarah, who had been quietly listening to our conversation, offered her own perspective. "My grandmother always said that how someone treats people who can't help them tells you everything you need to know about their character," she said. Tiffany saw Glenda as powerless, so she felt free to show her true nature. The divorce proceedings had been swift and decisive. Tiffany's criminal conviction voided any claim to marital assets, and Jake was able to separate from her without financial penalty. He kept the house they had shared, though he was considering selling it to eliminate reminders of his failed marriage. "I want to start fresh," he told me. "Maybe find a place closer to you if that's okay." I smiled, thinking about how much had changed since Patrick's funeral. "I'd love that. We have a lot of lost time to make up for." The charity gala at the Cleveland Museum of Art had raised a record-breaking $2 million for arts education programs. But more importantly, it had marked the beginning of a new chapter for Morrison Elegance and our family. I had decided to step back from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on design and long-term strategy. Eleanor was perfectly capable of handling management responsibilities, and it was time for me to enjoy the fruits of 30 years of hard work. I was also dating someone new, which would have shocked me a year ago. Dr. William Patterson was a widowed professor of art history who had attended the museum gala and been fascinated by the story behind Morrison Elegance. He was intelligent, kind, and completely unimpressed by money or status. Our relationship was growing slowly and naturally, based on genuine compatibility rather than convenience or calculation. "What I love most about you," he told me during one of our evening walks around the neighborhood, "is that you never forgot who you were, even when you were pretending to be someone else." Today, as I prepared to leave the courthouse, I reflected on the lessons I had learned from this entire experience. Success without character is meaningless. Money without integrity is worthless. And sometimes the greatest power lies in choosing when to reveal who you really are. Tiffany had mocked my dress at Patrick's funeral, calling it cheap and classless. She had no idea that the dress cost $66,000 or that I owned the company where she worked. But more importantly, she had no idea that character can't be bought, dignity can't be stolen. And real class comes from how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. As we walked out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine, Sarah squeezed my arm gently. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," I said honestly. "I have a son who forgives my mistakes and loves me despite my flaws. I have a business that brings beauty into the world, and I have learned that hiding who you are to protect others is sometimes the greatest gift you can give." Jake laughed. "Mom, I still can't believe you kept that secret for 30 years. How did you do it?" "Very carefully," I said, "and with a lot of help from people who understood why it mattered." "Do you ever regret it? The hiding, I mean." I considered the question seriously. If I had revealed my success earlier, Patrick might have struggled with depression and inadequacy. Jake might have grown up feeling entitled rather than learning the value of hard work. Our family might have been destroyed by money and status instead of strengthened by love and sacrifice. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret protecting the people I loved, even if it meant letting someone like Tiffany think she could treat me badly because I appeared powerless." "Well," Jake said, grinning, "she certainly learned otherwise." As we drove home together, I thought about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been destroying Tiffany out of anger or hurt feelings. Justice was simply allowing her actions to have their natural consequences while protecting other people from her harmful behavior. The $66,000 dress that had started everything was now hanging in my closet at home, cleaned and preserved as a reminder of the night when secrets became truth and justice was finally served. But I had learned something even more valuable than the satisfaction of seeing a cruel person face consequences. I had learned that real elegance doesn't come from expensive clothing or prestigious positions. Real elegance comes from treating others with dignity, even when they don't treat you the same way. Especially when they don't treat you the same way. Have you ever had someone underestimate you based on appearances only to discover later that you were much more than they assumed? How do you think we should balance protecting our loved ones' feelings with being honest about our achievements? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the power of quiet strength and dignity, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe for more stories about justice, family, and the courage to be authentic even in difficult circumstances. Thank you for listening to my story. May you always remember that true class comes from character, not clothing, and that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who choose to use their power wisely and quietly. Until next time, treat everyone with respect, because you never know who might be watching or what battles they've been fighting behind the scenes.